ring if you're ready to care. Oh, let's talk power, let's talk speed. Hosted by the one and only We Too Deep. Turn it up loud, feel the power in your seat. This is slapping me, yes, slapping me.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Slapping Me Community Show. This is episode 352. And we are going to do a backlash breakdown as we talk about what happened at Backlash on Saturday. And we got a whole lot more content on top of that. We got a rant of the week. I got a sports topic that I want to discuss. We got some, we'll like I said, we'll do backlash. Talk about Monday Night Raw last night. We got another question of the week I want to ask of you. And this week only, because of some special circumstances, I won't have a fan question Friday episode. Went into Discord earlier today when I found out about the scheduling difficulties and said, hey guys, won't be able to do a Friday episode. Send whatever questions you might have. We got a few of them from B Master. So we will answer those as well today. But let's start this episode with the We Too Deep rant of the week. And I just want to talk about something very particular to me and then apply it to a more general cultural application. And I want to talk just about North Carolina and more specifically Charlotte drivers. You know, last Wednesday, I told you that last Tuesday I got rear-ended, not a lot of damage, not really anybody's fault per se. And that got me a little heated. We talked about that a little bit, right? But there's this thing that goes on. I don't know if it's just Charlotte, if it's other major cities, like metropolis cities. Like, I've never been to New York. I've been to Boston once. It was over almost a decade ago, and I wasn't driving at that point, so I don't have an experience with driving in Boston. I've never been to, I've been in Nashville, but I'll say that. Tennessee drivers are pretty bad just in general. I've been in, Orlando, but I don't consider Orlando, when I went, a major metropolis, right? I've never been to, Dallas, but I've seen the roads in Dallas, the highways, the interstates in Dallas are so complex and complicated. I've never been out west in cities like San Fran and LA and stuff like that. So I'm just assuming that everybody knows what I'm talking about when I say this, but city drivers are just awful, bro. I grew up sort of in the country, kinda. I wouldn't say I'm a country boy. I wasn't out there in the sticks on the farm or anything. But I grew up sort of in very outside of city limits of Charlotte, in more rural areas. But even when I would go to Charlotte growing up, I don't remember the drivers being this bad. I kind of want to know what's going on. If you ask the locals, the people who grew up in North Carolina, they'd say it's the Yankee invasion from the north coming down south. I don't necessarily know if I agree with that fully, but I don't know what's going on with these drivers today. But there's just this lack of care for anyone else on the road. It feels like no one knows how to merge. Everyone's just thinking about themselves and where they gotta go, not thinking about the people around them. And the thing with driving, just as it is with life, if we can generalize this, you have to work with people, right? You have to work with people, and if you're not, like, one of my biggest pet peeves are people who don't use turn signals. Like, they put them on the car for a reason. You're trained to use them for a reason. Like, they're on there to signal to other people, to be considerate to other people, to tell people where you're going. But so, like, I don't know. Though people who don't use their turn signals have a special place of just absolute I guess is despisement a word? If not, I made it up. I despise people who don't use their signals, but people don't know how to merge. These people who go like 30 miles an hour over the speed limit, it's not going to get you anywhere quicker. Like genuinely, they've done studies on this. Swerving through traffic doesn't get you to your destination faster. It saves you like 3 minutes, but it also puts everyone else in a lot more danger, including yourself as well. But also, like, the difference between, now, 70 is the fastest you can go in speed limit wise in North Carolina, which I know people in Texas and out west are probably like 70. That's crazy. That's like our minimum speed, right? Because I think they have, don't you guys have like 80 mile an hour interstates, which I wish, but if you got caught going 80 in North Carolina, you're getting a ticket and probably your license suspended. That's actually reckless driving in North Carolina, anything over 80. But like these people, they've done these studies. People who going 70 miles an hour, the speed limit, and going 80 miles an hour over the small distance of an average drive saves you like 3 seconds. But the risk of getting in a crash goes up exponentially, right? So if you save 10 miles, let's say, because you're going miles per hour, between 70 and 80, you would have to drive 80 miles to see a noticeable, like you would have to travel a noticeable distance to see any noticeable change in time, right? Because most people's drive are at longest, the average drive is probably like 50 miles. And so 10 miles per hour in a 30-minute drive, you got to your destination like a minute quicker, while putting everyone else at risk. You see, like, you could do the math at this, and it doesn't actually save you that much time, but the risk of getting a ticket, getting in a wreck, killing yourself if you got in that wreck is so much more exponentially, right? And so working with other people, like knowing how to go, when to change lanes, when not to change lanes. We have this phenomenon, and I'm sure it's everywhere else as well, of these people who like merge into traffic on the highway going like 45. Like, I don't know if people know this, but it's called an acceleration lane for a reason, right? And they yield to get off the acceleration ramp onto traffic. The only person who's supposed to yield is the person entering traffic, right? The right of way goes to the people already on the highway. So if I'm riding in the far right lane, because I typically ride in the right lane, because I go the speed limit and nothing over, just to be genuinely honest with people. I can't afford a ticket nor my insurance going up, so I follow the speed limits. Now there's we'll leave that thought where it is, because that's a rabbit hole I don't want to chase. But yeah, so if I'm riding in the right lane, it's not my responsibility to move over so you can merge onto the interstate. If I do, it's a courtesy, but it's not my responsibility. It's your responsibility to go and catch and to get from your turn onto the ramp, and by the time you hit the end of the merging lane, to be at speed of traffic. Not, I'm going to move over at 45 and slow down this right lane, trying to get up to speed, right? That's not how that works, right? So, yeah, no one apparently knows how to drive anymore. And, I pass, on average, 3 wrecks a day, I feel like. I feel like every day I wake up now, and when I get within 5 miles of Charlotte, because I don't live, like I said, I don't live in the city limits of Charlotte. But I always know the closer I get to Center City, Charlotte, there's going to be a wreck at some point, right? I feel like I see strange. Like today I was driving home from work, and the street was on fire. Literally, the asphalt was on fire. No one was around. It was in the middle of the road, right before. So it was like an intersection, and it was right where the intersection ended, and you were about to merge over into the turning lane to turn onto the highway. And I just saw fire. Like, the street was literally on fire. I don't know who started it. Don't know how it happened. But the street was literally on fire. And I said, well, that's just something new to my experience book, right? Welcome to Charlotte. That's just a Charlotte experience. And so, yeah. But I want to apply this to a 30,000 foot limit. That type of attitude, this I don't care about anyone else, just myself type attitude, is really just a microcosm of our culture, where no one has any sense, no one has any common sense, no one has any care for other people, and they only care about themselves. And I truly feel that, like, I don't know, at some point within the last 15 years, I feel like things have changed with people, where people, not that there weren't people 15 years ago that were narcissistic and only cared about themselves, but I feel like at some point within the last 15 years, it became sort of accepted behavior to just care about yourself. No care for no one else. No one holds doors anymore, and then you get, like, I hold doors for people. Like, that's my favorite thing to do. You can ask anyone in my high school. I liked holding doors, right? It's a little weird, I guess, but anytime I was at, like, the front of the line, or, you know, I would get off the bus, and my bus was always, like, the last bus to get to school. And so I sat at the front because our bus driver sat us by last name, and mine is at the front. So I got off the bus, the first person, got to the door, and I just held the door for everyone as they got off the bus and walked in the building. Like, it just was something that I did. Didn't bother me, didn't care. But no one does that anymore. And, like, I'll go to a store and hold the door. No one will say thank you. No one will notice. Not that I'm doing it to get noticed. But you get the point. Like, no one has any care except for themselves. And, right, I don't see people holding doors anymore. Not that no one does it. I'm sure there's someone out there in the world who holds doors for people. But the idea of just being genuinely nice to someone just seems to have gone out of existence, of acceptable behavior in our culture. But then as I was thinking about this, that selfishness is, to get more philosophical or religious, I guess, because philosophy and theology or religious studies talk about, like, there are different explanations of the same questions, right? And So to get more philosophical, like that selfishness, the only care for myself, the that type of attitude, that's actually, like, I shouldn't be surprised at it. I shouldn't be surprised, because that is actually the result of our human nature. Like, that is what we do by nature, is just think of ourselves. Like, I had this conversation with someone a few months ago where they asked a question. It was in another server that I'm in, and they asked the question, like, they asked them, like, it was in a religious server, Christian server that I'm in, and they asked the question, like, I don't remember the exact question, but if are people who are born, like, narcissistic, psychopath, like, whose brain waves are just different, right? You could trace, like, the brain waves and the brain makeup of, like, serial psychopaths or serial killers, and there's a little bit of difference. I don't believe they were born that. Like, I don't believe Ted Bundy was born cannibalistic. I believe there was some sort of trauma or some childhood abuse of some kind that created him. Like there was a mix of forces. Like, I don't believe his brain was created to be the way it is. Or there'll be people who will be like, well, I'm OCD, my brain waves are different. No, there's no scientific proof that you were born with, like, you could be born with OCD. What happens is there's some sort of, so OCD, I think a lot of people think of OCD as sort of like the, oh, well, this isn't clean, I gotta do it. But OCD, by pure definition, is just a hyperfixation on certain thoughts, or an overthinking of certain, can't talk tonight, of certain thoughts, right? And so no one's born with that brain makeup. What they've done as they've done studies is they've realized a lot of that overthinking is caused by some sort of trauma. And so your nature and your nurture and your environment creates certain brain activities. But by nature, no one's necessarily born cannibalistic. But what I will say is, by nature, we are born to only think of ourselves. So I answered the question because essentially she said, if some are born psychopathic, like as psychopath, how come not everyone is? And I actually answered the question sort of hypothetically. I said, I don't have anything to prove this, but in our religious and the Christian system, the idea of original sin, the idea of original sin is that when the first human, Adam, sinned, his offspring, which would be all of us who have ever existed, his offspring inherited what we would call a sin nature. And so the debate in theological and philosophical circles will be over this idea called original sin. For example, Protestants believe in original sin. Catholics and Eastern Orthodox typically do not believe in original sin. And original sin just states that those who believe in it say that everyone who was born by nature sinner. So those who believe in original sin, myself included, would say that the human nature is sinful by nature, and therefore we sin because we're sinners. That who we are, our makeup, is a sinner. That by nature we do what we want to do, right? Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, those who don't agree with original sin, would say, no, you're not a sinner by nature, and you're not actually a sinner until you commit your first sin. Now, I don't know how they can justify that with the idea that everyone sins by nature, right? I don't know how they justify not believing in original sin when the guy who wrote 13 of the 66 books in your, well, if you're Catholic, you believe in 73, and if you're Eastern Orthodox or Ethiopian Orthodox, you believe in 81. That's a whole different conversation. But the guy who wrote over half of the New Testament and almost a sixth of the entire Bible, his name is Paul, the Apostle. He preaches original sin and sin nature, and all deserve hell because of Adam, and Adam's our representative, and because Adam sinned, we all die. That's what the book of Romans is all about. So I don't know how they do. Anyway, that's again a rabbit hole I don't really want to go down. But my overall thought is we're all born by nature psychopaths. I genuinely believe that if God removed what we call his common grace, which is the idea, like, God restrained certain people from doing certain sins. But if God removed his hand from the human race and just said, do as you please, we all would be worse than Adolf Hitler. We all would be Joseph Stalin and murder 2, 3, 4, 20 million people. Right? Like the Holocaust isn't just something that popped out of thin air. This was something that people do. People are genocidal by nature. Like if God just said, do as you please, like, this is why I don't understand those who believe in, like, the theory of evolution, or in evolution in general, or in, like, survival of the fittest, because that mindset essentially says there's no worth in human beings, and if there's no worth in being a human being, like, if that mindset is true, that we're just primordial scum from the bottom of the ocean that just happened to get lucky enough to become a human being, there's no purpose in life, and it's survival of the fittest, and I don't actually have to like you. Like we couldn't hold anyone accountable for a crime, because murder is just the natural result of scarcity of resources. Like we couldn't hold the person who robs a store because he's broke and he doesn't have any money. We couldn't hold him accountable to anything, because who's to say that that's wrong? If there's no lawgiver, which the Christians would call God, right? Atheism makes zero sense and it holds zero weight, because most atheists believe in laws. Like, ask any atheist, and they wouldn't, like, if I walked up to an atheist and said, does God exist? They say no. Well, is there anything called sin? They would say no. And then I said, well, if I threatened to murder you, what would you do? They would more than likely call the cops. Well, who told them that murder is wrong? See, atheists live within the Christian worldview, and they're blessed through that worldview because it's the only worldview that makes sense. It's the only worldview in which you can actually hold people accountable for doing wrong, right? And so my point in saying all of this is, it's the very reason communism doesn't work and will never work. Communism, socialism, anarchy, that human nature is the reason it doesn't work. On paper, it makes sense, but the theories about socialism working never include, because they're a lot of times the people like Karl Marx and Engels and all of them, Adolf Hitler, Stalin, and Lenin, and all of these people who try these things are atheists or non-Christians, most of them being atheists. Like, that's why the USSR, that's why Mao and the Chinese Revolution, that's why Hitler and Mussolini and all of the dictators. You ever notice when a dictator takes over, what's the first thing it tries to remove from society? Religion. So it goes after the churches and other religious organizations. Why? Because they're anti-God, right? And people tend to die for their religion. And so you can't control someone in a dictatorship if they're going to believe, like, in Christianity. Like, that's why when a dictator takes over and, you know, there's a Christian in a dictatorship, like, say, Iran, right? If you're a Christian in Iran and you get found out, more than likely you would be asked, do you support the Ayatollah as God? Or if you think about, like, the biblical story of Daniel in the lion's den, right? Or his 3 friends who gets thrown into the furnace. Well, why is that? Because they didn't worship the government. And so what did they try to do to Daniel and his 3 friends? Try to reprogram them. Like, the entire first 2 chapters of the book of Daniel in the Old Testament is how the Babylonians took these people and then tried to reprogram them, propagandize them into following the ways of Babylon and removing their religion from their life so that they can be controlled. Because religious people tend to be the least likely to be controlled by government figures. It's the reason why anarchy will never work. It's the reason, right? Because none of these systems ever take into consideration human nature and the fact that nature abhors a vacuum, meaning something will always rule. And so whenever you see things like the Communist Revolution of 1917 in Russia, where Lenin and them take over, and we're free, equal, you know, the people they own the means of production, and then eventually someone has to take over. And it's typically not the best people taking over. They're typically people who are greedy, only thinking for themselves, right? But also, like communism, if communism is equal distribution of wealth, regardless of the amount of work you put in, it decentivizes going to work. Because if I work 40 hours a week and you work 10 hours a week and we make the same $300, let's just say, well, why would I put 30 more hours in you for the same money? So now I'm going to work less and still get my 300. And so countries are less productive, societies are less productive. People are then made dependent on the system, and people go hungry and die. Because the number one cause of death in the world, in modern society, let's say over the last, let's say since 1900 till now, so that's 126 years. Since that time, in the last 126 years, the number one cause of death is socialism. Between Mao and Hitler alone is about 26 million. To add in what happened in Cuba, add in what happened in, Venezuela, add in what happened in China under Mao's revolution. I mean, you're talking like almost 50 million people. But that's actually number 2. We're not going to talk about number 1 because that's going to get me in trouble, in my opinions on that. But the number 1 killer of human life in the last 120 years is abortion. And that's a topic we're not going to discuss here right now. But that's the number 1 killer of human life. And then it's socialism. But I guess you can actually mix them together because abortion is actually part of socialism. It's actually one of the main tenets that the proponents of socialism really push, is removing offspring and destroying families. But that's a different content. Anyway, that's the rant. I don't want to continue down that rabbit hole because we got a long show going. But that's my rant. Like just the fact of how human nature is seen in just little things like driving and how, and I think it's going to get worse. Just my personal opinion. I think people are going to care less. Like it's sort of been predicted that people will only care like towards the end of time. And I'm not actually a proponent that the end of the world's coming. I'm not a proponent in that at the moment. I think we got a long time left in human history. That's just my opinion. But I think the closer we get to the end of time, the more selfish people are going to get. Especially in a society like America, where, I mean, when gas is $5 on average a gallon, and meat prices go up, and egg prices go up, and insurance and rent and everything goes up, and there's a scarcity of work and a scarcity of goods, people are going to start thinking for themselves and thinking about themselves only, and that's when human nature kicks in. And so I think it could get pretty dangerous. But that's where I'll end that. This next thing, this is the sports topic I wanted to talk about, and it's from a clip. I'm going to play a clip. You're going to hear the audio of the clip, and then I'll give my opinion of it. This is from Max Kellerman. He used to be on First Take with Stephen A. But this is from, I guess it's his podcast. I don't actually know if it's from his show or not. But this is Max Kellerman on this Mike Vrabel situation that's going on. And I'm going to give my opinion on this as well.
1/32, the 3% of the teams she covers, there's some kind of bias that might show up, who knows how, but whatever. Okay, I'm willing to say, okay, that's true, that's legitimate, but that's not why people are covering the story. They're using that as a bullshit excuse to be titillated by an affair, right? And it's so disgusting to me because, especially the latest, it comes across my reels, and I've worked with Diana Russini, right? And she's, I haven't worked with Mike Vrabel, but it's on my reel, so I can't avoid it. And it's like, oh, there are pictures, and the press is trying to create a timeline where when might they have been cheating. So without regard to how this affects their spouses, their children, they're like putting these families through hell under the guise of journalistic integrity and ethics, where in fact that is just an excuse to put out salacious stuff and like shame on the media for covering it the way they are. That's
all right. So first off, I want to say every single word of what he just said, I'm going to put my stamp of approval on, because this may be biased, being that I am a Patriots fan. But my opinion on this, so I've never really covered this on the podcast for a reason. I don't think it's all that important. But it's also because when I want to cover sports, when I want to talk about the Patriots, I want to talk about the Patriots on the field, what's going on with the team as far as teams doing this. Here's the news surrounding, A.J. Brown or whatever, right? I don't care about Mike Vrabel's personal life. I genuinely don't. But I 100% agree that the way the media is covering this, and I blame this on the popularity of, like, true crime. Because now everyone needs to be nosy about everything. Like, right? And so it's the, for lack of better terms, I'm going to call it the Candace Owens effect. Because Candace Owens does her podcast, and she just did a series on Erica Kirk and how Erica's involved, and she might still be doing it. I don't know. I don't pay attention to her. She's completely useless to me, in my opinion. But she did this series, and she does it. I listened to the first 3 episodes of it and got tired of it, because she runs it like a true crime documentary or a true crime podcast, where it's like allegedly, and the way she talks and speaks, she's able to lead people into sort of believing what she's saying is true, even though there's no actual evidence being presented, right? And so, but because of that, everyone is so nosy and trying to figure out timelines. I guess people don't have anything else to do than to worry about another man and another woman. Like, sure, did an affair happen? More than likely. More than likely an affair happened. But who actually cares? Like, that happens every day. And it's my opinion, and I could be wrong, this is solely an opinion. My opinion is that the media covers it this way, and the fans who talk about it this way only care about this story because of who the team is. It is my opinion that if any of the other 31 head coaches were seen in a affair with a reporter, it would not be going on in the news as long as it has been, if it even makes the news. You cannot tell me if the head coach of, say, the Arizona Cardinals, I don't even know if it's still Shane Steichen. I don't think it is. I don't even know who the head coach of the Cardinals is. Or if the Jaguars head coach, or if Brian Dable, or one of the Harbaughs, or anything like that, or LaFleur, or the guy in Detroit, I can't think of his name right now. You can't tell me that if any of the other 31 head coaches in the National Football League got caught in an affair with a reporter, none of it would have made the news the way that it's been in the news. I genuinely believe that the media and the fan base of football is still trying to get some sort of retribution on the New England Patriots for how dominant they were from 2000 to 2019. I genuinely believe that. And then they say, and then you get like the Eagles fans, who are the absolute most insane fans in the world when it comes to creating fan conspiracies. Diana Russini, this has all been a giant op to lower A.J. Brown's price, while at the same time believing you're going to get a first-round pick. Well, yeah, you're going to get a first-round pick. And you are always going to get a first-round pick. But you couldn't trade A.J. in 26 before June 1st to get 2026 draft picks. So you were never going to get 2026 draft picks. Diana Russini didn't change that. The cap changed that. The cap, the salary cap was that main driver. If it wasn't going to cost you $40 million or $50 million to trade A.J. Brown before June 1st, you would have gotten a first-round pick at the draft for A.J. Brown. But you couldn't afford that. That's not Diana Russini's fault. So these tampering accusations of Mike Vrabel used her to tamper to lower his value. No, he didn't. First off, there's no single piece of evidence to ever assume that. That's just absolutely insane. And all it is the league, the fans, and the media trying to get some sort of retribution on the Patriots because they're good again. And if things happen the way I think they're going to happen at the start of June, this is going to be a Patriots team with Drake May, who's at second place in the MVP running, who probably is going to be just as good this year, we'll just say, right? Who with a star running back in the making in Travion Henderson, with Hunter Henry at tight end, with Roridan as a rookie behind him who could turn into be a very good tight end, with the receiving core made up of the potential, if it happens the way I think it's going to happen at the beginning of June, of A.J. Brown, Stephon Diggs, and Romeo Doubs, and then you can add in either Kayshon Boutte, Pop Douglas, Kyle Williams. Like, we're going to be 4, 5, 6, probably the deepest receiving class the Patriots have had since Randy Moss, at least. Right? At least in talent, the top 3 are going to be up there. While at the same time having a top 10 defense this year. Like, this is generally the most excited I've been in May, June ever as a Patriots fan. This time of year I typically don't care about because we typically don't do anything in the offseason. I typically don't really get excited for Patriot football until the season begins. Right? And so the team's getting good again. There's a legitimate chance we win anywhere between 12 and 14 games again next year. Depending on how you look at strength of schedule, whether you base it off of opponent wins in 2025 or if you base it off projected wins, the Patriots average out around middle of the pack in strength of schedule this year, with either the 6th hardest or the 12th hardest, I think is where it averages out, right? Depending on how you look at and determine strength of schedule. And so I genuinely just believe the media, the fan base, I don't want to say the league offices, but I think the league is fine with how it's being covered because it gives them some type of press. It gives them a story to talk about. But I genuinely believe, I don't think Mike Vrabel's going anywhere. The team's not going to do anything to him. I don't think he's going to resign. And he's going to come in, we'll do business. We get A.J. Brown, get Stephon back in the building, and you move on. And you go and win some games. And I think the fan base and the media wants to do everything possible to try to get some sort of retribution. Oh, this can't be happening again. Like these are the type of accusations or news stories that only make the press as like a last-ditch effort to try to get people to get in trouble, right? So I'm honestly over the press. I'm tired. Like, I don't care enough about people's personal lives to care when the affair started, if Diana was pregnant by Mike or not by Mike. Did she name her son Michael because she was in an affair with Vrabel? I don't care. I genuinely do not care. You know what I care about Mike Vrabel? Are we going to win games, Mike? When September comes around and October comes around and, at the end of December when it's playoff time, are we going to be in contention? That's the only questions I have this year about Mike Vrabel being my head coach. Are we going to win games? What's the game plan like? How's the team doing in practice right now? What's camp like? Right? That's what I care about. Could care less about anything off the field. That's how I am with it. Like, I don't care about stuff like the Stephon Diggs stuff with Cardi or the crack or whatever was going on in the offseason last year. Could care less. Don't care who Stephon Diggs is dating. Don't care who his baby mamas are. Don't care how many baby mamas you got. All I care about is he on my team? Is he playing well? And are we going to win? Is he going to cost me games? And he didn't, because he had over 1,000 yards this year and was the main contributor to our offense. That's what I care about. Genuinely. With that being said, let's move over to our Backlash breakdown at Backlash. So we're just going to go down the matches as they happened. I watched this on Sunday. I was at a concert on Saturday. Didn't watch this live. Watched this Saturday afternoonish, eveningish. Right. Sunday was Mother's Day. So ended up, going to Mother's Day stuff in the afternoon. My mom wanted to watch a movie. For Mother's Day, they get the family together, and she wanted to watch this movie called The Sheep Detectives. I'm gonna be honest with you, fantastic movie. Fantastic movie, bro. I thought it was gonna be a little stupid, because it just looked stupid. But the story was great. Everything about it was pretty good. It was funny, good storytelling, good plot. I definitely recommend that movie, Sheep Detectives. Anyway, so I got home after watching that, turned on Backlash. And then Backlash was over, and then it was time to go eat dinner. And my mom's favorite thing is like steak potato salads. And my dad made steak, went over to, right? So I watched Backlash while all of that happened. So let's break that down, right? So the night begins with Braun Breaker and Seth Rollins, which, I mean, of the 5 matches on the card, I guess was the best one to start the show with. I didn't hate it. I thought, so just in preface, I'm giving this like a B+, not B+. I'll give it a B-. All right, I think a lot of people unnecessarily hated on this. And I think a lot of people are unnecessarily hating on the product, right? Like, I genuinely thought this was, I wouldn't say perfect, I wouldn't say this was fantastic, great, whatever, but I would say this was genuinely a good PLE, right? This match, for what it was, I liked it, right? I thought it was fine. Braun Breaker got the win, which is what was needed. But with that being said, nothing was necessarily memorable about the match. But it was good in the moment. And that's what, like I didn't write anything down in the moment to talk about. And I did it with other matches, whether positive or negative, right? So because of that, like, it's a really good match. It was good. Nothing memorable to hate but nothing memorable to love either. And so it was a good match. And I think my issue, though, is obviously this is probably going to be the match that goes the feud that goes all the way into Survivor Series War Games, right? And we talked about this, I think, a few weeks ago with the Vision and, right, being Braun, Logan, Austin Theory, and probably by the time we get around to Survivor Series, Bronson Reed will be back. And then you'll probably have Joe Hendry, the Prophets, and Seth, right? And so that's obviously going to be that long-term feud that gets booked that way. That's what I'm seeing from the programming. And so I feel like we'll have a lot more of interaction between Braun and Seth. Not quite sure how I feel about that. But then we move to match 2, which is Trick and Sammy. The first 2 matches I thought were okay. Like, this wasn't anything special. Lil Yachty getting involved was interesting, and I guess for a little bit. But Trick won. That's all I really cared about. We move on. I feel so bad for the U.S. titles, both men's and women's, because it feels like there's just no creative plan for it. Just being genuine. I don't care about this title. And Trick has it, but Trick needs a legitimate opponent, not Sami Zayn. So I hope this is over now as we move into the future of the programming. Again, nothing memorable about this to really talk about, but I'm happy with the results. Third is Danhausen, a mystery partner, versus Miz and Kit Wilson. And so let's just set this up. Miz and Kit Wilson in the ring. Danhausen comes out. He's bringing out his cloning machine because he was trying to clone himself. And out comes Minniehausen. And played, by the way, if you didn't hear, by, I forgot his name in Mexico, but he used to play El Torito about a decade ago. In WWE, he played El Torito. He went by some name in AAA. That the midgets division, or what? I shouldn't have called them midgets. I don't know. Are they called mascaras or something? And I was probably wrong too. But the small peoples, that division I think got cut from AAA, and a lot of the wrestlers there were sort of like let go when WWE bought the company. But they kept some along, and one of them I guess was this guy El Torito, and he played Danhausen. Guys, a lot of people are gonna hate me for this because we're gonna have a side conversation on this match. Because Saturday night, Kara, without watching anything, she posted something about Danhausen, and I want to have that conversation. But then I also saw a lot of people just hating what went down, like with the mystery partner and everything, and so let's talk about that. Like I thought the match was fantastic. I'm going to be honest with you, this was my match of the night. This was the moment of the night that I go back and remember. This was genuinely entertaining. And so I want to have this conversation in a minute, but first I want to play this clip from Bryan Alvarez. And when I'm playing and agreeing with Bryan Alvarez, you know that there's something, because I typically don't care about Alvarez's opinion on wrestling. But everything he's about to say in this clip is 100% accurate. And yeah, I'll give my opinion on the clip, and we'll talk about this side conversation here in a minute. Let me play the clip though.
Here's the thing, guys. I don't think people understand. Like, people don't like this match. Hey, listen, you don't have to like anything. You can like whatever you want. But I'll just say this. You don't fucking get it, okay? The thing with wrestling is, yes, sometimes wrestling is silly, and it fucking sucks, okay? But if it's silly, but there's an internal logic to this silliness, well, then it's great. And you threw a little person into a fucking cloning machine. What the fuck happens? Clones come out. Crowd goes wild for these clones. So all these clones, they start swarming Kit, and they're beating his ass, and the crowd's going nuts. This crowd, by the way, that was booing this at the beginning, they're now going nuts. They get in the ring, and Danhausen gives Kit an airplane spin, and he tosses him, and Wade Barrett's going crazy because that was his finish. And he throws Kit in the corner, and the little guy goes for the curse. And as he goes for the fucking curse, I could not believe my goddamn fucking eyes. He goes for the curse, and Kit Wilson holds up a fucking mirror. Okay? As you're listening to this, you're probably, if you didn't see the show, you're like, Bryan, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Fine, I don't give a shit. But, like, he held up a mirror, and so the Mini cursed himself, and the crowd, this was the biggest pop of the match, because the crowd suspends their disbelief about this stupid curse. And so when you go to curse someone, and the other guy holds up a mirror, the crowd's like, oh shit! Like, they literally screamed, oh shit, when they did this spot. I'm not making this up. They popped like crazy. So this poor little guy gets cursed. And then Danhausen gets back in the ring, and then, Miz goes for the fire extinguisher for the little guys, but he's still cursed, so the fire extinguisher doesn't work. But then, just like fucking Kill That Mole, he looks at it, and then it sprays his own fucking face, and he gets his ass thrown into the ring, and Danhausen hits a jumping kick and gets the pin. Guys, how can you hate this? How? What's wrong with you? If you hate this, why are you watching wrestling? Right? Here's the thing, guys.
Like I said, 100% agree with Bryan Alvarez's take there, which is very rare, right? You heard Dave in the background. I don't listen to these people a lot. Don't really care about Dave or Alvarez all that often in their opinion. But they're right here. If you don't like this, what is there to like? This was the greatest thing on the show. I just... So the side conversation, and everyone's entitled to their opinion. But Kara comes out, and I want to read what she posts. I want to read her word for word as she posted. And Sheep says, I'm going to be honest with y'all. I'm getting off the Danhausen train here. Yes, he has a good gimmick, and can be entertaining, but some things, in my opinion, are just getting stupider. The stupid stuff he does on ESPN, to me personally, in my opinion, he's another flavor of the month like Kit Wilson, Jey Uso, and LA Knight. It's going to get old. It's going to get more cringy as time goes on. It's like Grandpa Triple H pulling a quarter out of his ear. I'm calling it. So the question then in this side conversation is Danhausen the flavor of the month? And my answer to this, genuinely, is no. He is not. Danhausen is wonderful. Like, here's the thing I don't understand. If R-Truth did this, we'd clap and cheer. R-Truth gets in the Royal Rumble with the ladder, thinking he's in the Money in the Bank match, and we laugh and cheer. But then Danhausen does mini clones, and this actually has, like Alvarez said, some sort of internal logic within the story that actually makes sense. You put a person in a cloning machine and he gets cloned. That makes sense. It may be a little silly, but at least it makes sense. So when I say booking needs to be logical, that's what I mean. I don't mean that it has to be realistic. And I think a lot of fans, casual fans in particular, want wrestling to be realistic. But it's never been that. I think it's so Matt Rarewalt, who is the announcer on TNA, used to be in WWE. Can't think of his name. He used to be with Rusev and in the Vaudevillains. I can't think of his name to save my life. Matt Rarewalt posted a tweet on Saturday that I 110% agree with. He said, because I think a lot of people forget where pro wrestling comes from and what the industry has always been. Right? He said, let us never forget that wrestling as we know it was born from the circus. This is something I hate from the so-called purists. Pro wrestling is designed to be a 3-ring circus that has incredible athletes, but also comedians and stuntmen and showmen and dancers and clowns. Danhausen is pro wrestling because that's what it's always been from the beginning. From the beginning of time, pro wrestling as we know it, from the 1920s, was always a carnival side act. And what promoters of these carnivals understood in the 20s is that if I fake the results and pre-plan it, and then I can get gimmicks involved, and I can make you like one wrestler and dislike another, and maybe I can have some fun and have the circus clown get his ass kicked, right? And that's what Danhausen is. He's a comedy act. But sometimes the comedy act steals the show. This was the greatest part of the night. Danhausen is not flavor of the month. He's just not. I don't agree that he's on the level of a Jey Uso. Because Jey Uso was forced. I genuinely don't believe people really cared about Jey Uso. And they forced a response on us. Right? Genuinely, I believe that. But I also think it's hard for me to put Danhausen and Jey Uso in the same book when Jey Uso was booked at the top of the card, and they're putting Danhausen in the middle of the show in a comedy gimmick where it's clearly supposed to be comedy. And this is the thing that frustrates me about wrestling fans. Because on the Sickos, you have the purist Matt Raywalls calling out, where wrestling's got to just be athleticism and none of the entertainment. And then you have like the casual fans who, if it's not like cool or like if it's not like something that could reach, you know, the ESPN audience, like, but even within that, like, because Kara, your comment on the Discord about the stuff he does on ESPN, I get it. It's a little corny. And now personally, I agree. I don't want Danhausen on ESPN, but I think it's a little fun. I think it's fun. And I think some of us just need to look at it for what it is. And it's selling merchandise. It's getting people to watch. It's just it's just good TV. And I don't have anything to complain about it. This match was hilarious. It was everything I wanted. It was hilarious. This lucha guy, Danhausen, comes around running and jumping and flipping, and it's just good TV, bro. Like, I don't know what there is to hate. I got to go back to Alvarez's question. If you hate this, why are you watching wrestling? If you don't like this, I don't think the industry's for you. I'm just going to be honest. I don't think the industry is for you. And there's a question when we get to the fan questions that I'm going to have a pretty rough answer for. Because there's a mindset now that within wrestling fans that genuinely is just getting more irritating by the week. I'm just going to be completely honest. And it's mainly casuals. Like, I know a lot of my fan base listeners are casual fans, and I don't mean to shit on y'all all the time. But there's a mindset going on that genuinely just irritates me every single week. So, but we'll get there when we get to there. The next match is Iyo versus Kairi. Not Kairi, excuse me, fuck me. Iyo versus Asuka. If the fans got their way, it would be Kairi. Iyo versus Asuka. And what turned out, storyline-wise, to be a really satisfying finish. Iyo gets the win. That's all that really matters. I could care less about the match. I got something about the crowd. There were chants during the match. We want Kairi. We want Kairi. Guys, can we stop? Can we grow up? Can the crowd just grow up? Releases happen, especially when you realize Kairi asked to go home. Kairi wanted to go to Japan. She wanted to go home, and WWE allowed her to go home. And guess what? For the next 90 days, she's getting paid to go home. And she's going to run Japan, which is more than likely what Asuka's about to do as well. So Asuka loses, and this entire story is that of essentially trainer and protege. Like, Asuka trained, what they call it, the senpai or something like that, right? I'm not a big fan of Japanese culture or have much knowledge on it, but that's essentially what it was. It was like master and protege, right? And trying to see if Iyo was good enough to beat her master, essentially, right? Her trainer. And she overcomes and she wins. And then you get the moment at the end where they engage, they stop being rivals. And then Monday Night Raw, which we'll talk about here in a second, they, you know, as Asuka's leaving the building, sort of insinuating she's leaving the company, they embrace again. This actually turned out to be quite a good fulfillment in this story. But I'm just so tired of the crowd. Like, you're there to play a part. Enjoy the show. Why the hell are you going to chant, "We want Kairi"? She's not there. You know she's not there. Like, your chants don't do anything. Especially knowing she wanted to go home. But also just, it's completely disrespectful. Not only is it just a stupid chant, because there's no chance they send her out there. Like, she's not there. But also knowing that there's two women, one of which in Io Sky is arguably the greatest women's wrestler on the planet, depending on who you ask. And the other in Asuka held that same spot 10, 15 years ago to some people. Two athletes, two entertainers who are in the middle of their performance. Like, imagine going to, the only play I really know by details is Hamilton. So imagine going and paying pretty similar prices to Backlash, like $400 to get a ticket to sit in the auditorium and watch Hamilton. And when the actor who plays Alexander Hamilton, or let's not play him, let's not use him. When the guy who plays Lafayette, also I think plays in Act 2 Thomas Jefferson. Right, so say Act 2 comes around, and this guy, he loses the French accent. He now plays Thomas Jefferson. And you start chanting, "We want Lafayette." Just think how rude and inappropriate that is. To the man who spent weeks upon weeks upon weeks preparing for this show, and you're going to interrupt and say, "We don't want you." Or none of the original cast is on Broadway anymore performing this in the traveling tour. So imagine, Alexander Hamilton, the original cast, is played by Lin-Manuel Miranda. Imagine he comes and you come and you watch the new cast when it comes to your city, and you pay $400, and Hamilton comes out and you start chanting, "We want Miranda." That's rude, bro. It's disrespectful to the man who's playing that part in the middle of his performance to say, "We don't want you, we want the other guy." It's completely disrespectful to Io and Asuka to chant someone else's name who's not in the building, not in the match, while they're performing for you, the fan, and giving you this experience. It's completely inappropriate. It's completely disrespectful. I'm so over fans thinking they have the right to cheer whatever they want. You don't. You're part of a show. Right? You're part of the show. You don't get to chant whatever the hell you want to chant. I'm sorry. That's not how this works. That's not how this works. I've stood on that business for a long time. You don't get to chant whatever you want to chant. That's genuinely why, if I ever ran my own promotion, I'd highly consider getting paid members of the crowd and not letting people come in. I know that's an expense, but, like, genuinely, you ruin the product. I'm just gonna say, you ruin the product when you chant random shit. That makes no sense. You ruin the experience for the other people watching. Goes back to what we started with. Think more than yourself. Right? Then we end with Roman. I know there was a segment in between the matches, but we'll get to that last. We end match-wise with Roman and Jacob. And the match was fine. Roman wins. Really, this was just a setup for Jacob to attack him, to set up this whole thing that going forward. I don't know where it's going. I'm somewhat intrigued. We shall see. I'm hoping something important happens on Monday, because I will be in the building. Roman Reigns will be there. I'll salute my tribal chief. But let's actually talk about the last major segment of Backlash. And that's John Cena. John Cena comes to the ring dressed in his suit right before the main event and announces this highly anticipated thing, and it's what he's calling The John Cena Classic. Now, before we even talk about that, I have one concern. Why did we have this whole year of John Cena saying, I'm going away, only for that to happen, and he hasn't gone away? Why are you coming back, bro? Go somewhere. Like, I want you off my... like, you spent and ruined an entire year of programming around this retirement tour, and then you lose your final match. You're supposed to ride off in the sunset, and you haven't left. Go somewhere. We don't need you no more, John. Go. Go do your movies. Go wherever Dwayne is. Actually, you know what? Dwayne's been acting a little sus here recently. Don't go anywhere near Dwayne. But we don't need you on TV, John. But now let's talk about the actual John Cena Classic. The idea is stupid. Let's just take the idea in kayfabe. You're going to get a bunch of NXTers. And I don't know if it's going to be exactly like NXT guys facing WWE. I don't really completely understand. But essentially the idea is we're going to have a bunch of matches. And at the end of the night, the fans are going to vote for who should win the John Cena Classic Championship. And you don't have to win your matches in the Classic. I guess you're going to have a match to qualify. But you don't have to win your match during the John Cena Classic to be voted champion. The fans can pick anyone to be champion. So that in and of itself is stupid. Why the actual frick... Like I have zero care of your match then if winning doesn't mean anything. Right? But can we just talk about the most stupidest thing? Y'all really... If you're a fan and you actually believe, John Cena, that this is in the fans' hands, just stop watching. Just genuinely stop watching wrestling. This is a PR stunt, guys. This is PR 101. Pretend that we're listening to the fans. This is so TKO said, no, bro, we're listening to you. You guys voted for this. They already know who they want to win, and they're booking it that way. Your votes don't actually mean anything. They don't. This is to get someone over in some way, shape, or form. Probably going to be an NXT guy. And with Sheena tweeting for Will Cruz, I can't think of his NXT name right now, the way he is, I'm thinking it's to get him over without him having to win anything in NXT. So he can come in, lose whatever match or whatever, and be gritty or whatever. And the fans, I guess, could kind of like, I don't know. I think it's really stupid. This whole idea is stupid. Anytime something feels corporate to me, I'm going to be anti-against it. And this is just this is just, so when I talked about the internal logic of Danhausen, this has zero internal logic, right? It feels like a corporate mind trick. It's PR. It's, guys, we're listening, whatever you want. But really not. Right? It's just, yeah, I'm just over this whole idea, to be honest with you, as a whole. So now I want to talk about Monday Night Raw, and here's what I got to say about Monday Night Raw. Since I've got Netflix, again, post WrestleMania, this has been the worst WrestleMania, or excuse me, the worst Raw to date. To the point of, I look at my finances and say, I don't think it's worth me paying for Netflix anymore. Because I don't think it's going to get any better. And so my Netflix subscription cancels next Monday. Now, I won't watch Netflix next Monday because I'll be live in the building. So I'm not watching another episode on Netflix. I can just watch the rerun, or the reviews, or the clips, or whatever on YouTube, and probably get the same experience. That was a hard watch last night. Not that it wasn't important, but it's just really difficult to pay attention for 2.5 hours to a product that's C+ at best, right? Nothing, like if nothing grabs my attention and you lose that, because my attention span, my ADHD kicks in really quickly. You got to keep me engaged and off of my phone if you want to keep me engaged, right? And when the second I go to my phone and I'm disinterested in your show, right? I think the only thing that really captured me was the whole Obafemi segment. With no one answered it. Well, I'm going to go find somebody. And the first person I find, I'm going to beat down. I like that. I don't want them to continue to do it, but every now and then it's fine. I like the open challenge, I'll be honest with you. I'm hoping someone... See, they ran into a problem that I mentioned last week, right? They don't have any big guys in the company for Oba that offer the illusion of some sort of competition to Obafemi. And so now they got to try to run these tricks of, well, he just attacked the Garzas, right? They need some big guys, but they released a lot. Like, a Braun Strowman would work, if I'm being completely honest. And I kind of hope, even if it's a one-off, that with Raw being in North Carolina, Braun Strowman's home state, next week, part of me sort of wants him to be the guy who answers it. First off, Braun Strowman should be on the roster. He's a guy that can get people over. But yeah, the lack of big guys might kill this momentum pretty quickly. That's my major concern. But the rest of the show was just pretty eh. Finn Balor kicked the shit out of JD, though. That was a crazy moment. And then I guess the most unexpected moment would be Maxine Dupree sitting in the car with the Vision. But I'm also a little intrigued by that, to see where that goes. But again, not really any opinions on it. The Mega Championship was defended, the AAA Mega World Champion defended on Raw. We knew Dom wouldn't lose it. I like the infiltration. They're really making this event on the 30th feel important. There's mass, and here's the thing. I was a little disappointed that mass versus mass didn't happen at WrestleMania, but I really do like that they saved it for a AAA event. I think it makes it mean more. Yeah. So let's go to fan question. The fan questions. What typically would have been fan question Friday, but we got some fan questions here. I missed a question. Let me start with this question that B Master asked first that I missed. If WWE is using AI, why does the product still suck? And this is the question that I want to talk about, the mindset that sort of irritates me. First off, I agree they shouldn't be using AI. Let me answer the actual question before. AI is not to the point of writing any genuinely good story. You know what I just realized? My story wasn't told. I don't know why I keep forgetting to put We Too Deep Pro Wrestling on. I'm gonna be genuinely honest with you guys. I'm not interested in that segment anymore. So I'm gonna take Kara's advice and say, do what you want to talk about. It's fun, but I just don't necessarily think it's all that engaging. I know you guys like to hear me book, but it's one of those things that I tend to forget about while I'm recording, just like now. But anyway, back to the question. AI doesn't really create all that good of storylines, and AI can only do so much. at some point you have to turn what AI outputs to you into something on TV. But I want to answer this assumption that the product sucks. Now, sucks is a generalized or a subjective term. Excuse me, it's subjective, because I wouldn't say the product sucks. I would say it's mediocre. It's not the Bloodline story, right? But nothing's going to replicate the Bloodline. But the opinion that really just irks me is that TKO's ruining wrestling. No, they're not. Because there were several points in the history of WWE where TKO was never even involved, where the show kind of sucked. It kind of was bad. 2016 to 2019 was a bad 3 years of WWE. TKO wasn't involved. I don't think we're at that point. Genuinely, I don't think we're at that point. I think there's things that people aren't interested in, and I can give some critique there. I think some people are taking just the overall experience of being priced out and having to pay for everything, and taking the angst at the business side of the business, which I think is a fair thing to complain about. I think it's fair to say TKO is running the business for money. And I will 100% say I agree. But I think it's an incorrect way to look at things, to take that angst towards how they're running business, and then put that same angst and hatred for the business side of the business, and look at the actual wrestling side and say, well, I hate TKO because they're pricing me out, so the product just sucks. They're killing wrestling. No, they're not killing WWE's not dying. It's not going anywhere. They're turning profit year in and year out, and as long as that happens, the company will still be here. They're developing new superstars, so there's a future of the business. We're just in an era right now that happens every so often where it's a turning of the guard. We all should have been prepared for this. There was only so much of John Cena we were going to get over the last decade. When we knew John Cena was leaving, we knew Brock Lesnar was leaving, we knew that eventually people like Charlotte and Bianca, I don't think Bianca's coming back, just genuinely, I don't think Bianca's coming back. She's in her upper 30s, she's about to have a child. I don't think she's coming back. I don't think Naomi's coming back. Genuinely, I think we should have been prepared for the turning of the guard, where Charlotte and Bayley and Becky and all of them are out of the company, and in comes the new era. And that's what we're building, that new era right now. And when you build a new era, you got to get people sort of introduced to these characters. And I just think it's completely unfair to sit in here and say, well, the product sucks. No, it doesn't. You may not necessarily enjoy everything, but the product genuinely doesn't suck. I think on a show in and show out, you get B- to B+ shows every single week. Just going to be honest with you. I think you get average wrestling shows every single week. That doesn't mean it's awful, which is what a lot of people are acting like it is. What the problem is you don't like how they're running business, and you're turning that business angst on the actual performers, and I just don't think that that's fair. You can hate how Ari Emanuel and TKO and the board and all of it manage the business side of the business. Critique that all you want. But can we stop saying the product sucks? Because it doesn't. Genuinely, it's a B- to B+ show every single time they perform. Just genuinely. So part of the reason I used to, several months ago I would complain about it or not talk about it is I just wasn't watching it. Right? And NXT has felt a little dry with the call-ups and the new people coming in. And I was getting to the point where like, oh man, I hate NXT. This was the last few weeks. I was like, didn't really enjoy it. But that's when that thought clicked to me. We got to give it time. It's a new era. And eras change. And everyone that I liked has now been called up to the main roster. And I'm really enjoying the parts of the main roster where my favorites are now, right? You get to watch Oba and Ethan Page, my two favorite wrestlers from NXT. They're on Monday Night Raw. My favorite women's wrestler from NXT, Sol Ruka, Monday Night Raw. Gives me a reason to care about Monday nights, right? But then I can look and say, well, I can't afford it. But I can watch the clips on YouTube and support them and sit here and say, you know what, the product's genuinely good. Right? It's genuinely good. We just got to give it some time. We're in a changing of the guard where the older wrestlers are leaving. And we have new people filling their places. And it's going to be a rough year or so. I'm just going to say it. It's going to be, the next year or so might be a little rough as we change over who's the bigger stars on the roster. But you got Obafemi over. And sooner or later, Trick is going to be over on the main roster. And sooner or later, Javon Evans is going to be the guy on the main roster. And Sol Ruka and JC Jane and Roxanne Perez. We got our future in place. The future's looking bright. Right? It's sort of like when your team goes through a rebuild, right? So, think about like the Detroit Lions, right? Detroit Lions went through some hell for a long time. Then they get Dan Campbell as a coach. They get Aiden Hutchinson. They get Amon-Ra. They get two really good running backs in David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. You get a solid defense. You start winning some games, right? Or you think about the Patriots, being a Patriots fan, right? And you win for 20 years straight. And then Brady leaves, Gronk leaves, Edelman retires, Belichick's gone, Mac Jones is your quarterback. But then you draft Drake May, and you sign Stephon Diggs, and you get Mike Vrabel as your coach. And there's, A.J. Brown might be coming to town. And you got Gonzo on the defense. And you have Milton Williams as the beast. And you got Barmore beside him. And you're drafting young. And you're actually hitting on some draft picks now. And you get Will Campbell. And now you start to, there were a period of time between the Mac Jones and Cam Newton quarterbacks transitions from out of Brady where I didn't watch football. Didn't care. There were like 4 seasons where I just did not care about the Patriots. Right? But then last year, hope arose. Like there's genuinely hope in New England over this football team. And the rebuild's over. But it takes some time. Right? It's not going to be instant success. Right? Same thing with WWE. They're rebuilding who's going to be the top of their card. And you got a star in Obafemi already over. You got him over. And you got Sol Ruka, who's going to be a star. And JC Jane. And Ethan Page. And Ricky Saints. You got some guys who are going to be corner posts for the next 5-10 years. You just got to get them. You got to get them there, while also removing some of the guys that have been familiar faces. But that's part of the business, and there's going to be growing pains in doing that. And the product's going to suffer for a year or two, right? But at the end of that suffering, when you go through the trial and in watching 2 to 3 years. When the company's clicking, bro, and you got stars that are over, and you got NXT just pumping stars up like they're doing. Like NXT's finally able to work the way it's designed to be worked, right? I'm choosing to be positive and looking at the future of the business and NXT and how they're running their developmental. WWE's in great hands, bro. They got money to back it up, and they got a developmental system that's actually creating superstars. When Tatum Paxley gets caught up, it's going to be a banger. When there's people down there right now that I think, if used correctly and trained correctly, and can get over. Jada Parker's going to get over, even if it's just in the mid card. She's going to get over. Lola Vice will get over. I think you got people like as much as Nikita Lyons got a pop last week, guys. That's something I didn't expect. The product doesn't suck, bro. We're in growing pains. And it's going to feel like it's not as good as it used to be coming out of 4 years of A-plus cinematic brilliance with Roman Reigns. Right? And we had a year of struggle, 2 years of struggle coming out of that. But there's hope on the upswing, and you just got to get through that. The product's good, guys. Don't let this I'm going to call it what it is, this propaganda of the IWC who hates it and the sickos who hate on it. And I always talk about horseshoe theory. The sickos and the uber casuals are essentially the same people, right? Because they're both of them are the groups that are hating on TKO right now, but they also will then complain about the other group. The uber casual are going to complain about the sicko, and the sicko will complain about the hardcore casual fan, right? And then there's me in the middle trying to use common sense and saying, guys, it's not what it used to be. It's not, it's not 2023 Bloodline when things were just clicking. But there's potential. I see some stars in the making. If y'all can just hold on, be a little bit patient, let WWE do what they do. We got stars cooking. And in about a year's time, I think we're going to be full gear cooking towards some very good product. Just give it some time, guys. Give it some time. That's all I'm asking, right? Forget about how the business is being run on a business side, outside of the ring, from an administrative side. Yes, ticket prices are kind of high. I think they're going to start bringing them down. I think they realize we can't keep outpricing people. But I also think Endeavor's almost made their money back from their initial investment into the company. That $9 billion they paid to get the company. I'm pretty sure they've almost got their money back. And so now the price can go lower. I genuinely believe within the next 2 to 3 years, pricing will go down and be more fan-friendly. I also think that's why they're creating Club WWE. Just genuinely. I have no interest in paying to be a fan of the product, like in that way. But I think it's to give the people who are willing to pay it, hey, pay to be part of this exclusive club that gets all this cool stuff. And that's where I think they're going to get a lot of their revenue, and then they'll lower normal ticket prices. That's just what I believe is going to happen. I could be wrong. That's a theory, but next question, what's better, a person that's boring and can't draw but has a long title reign, or a championship that keeps changing hands between two people that have the it factor? To be honest with you, neither is ideal. But if I had to choose between one or the other, just because I don't like hot potato championship runs, which is the one where they just flip back and forth. I would rather a long title run from someone who necessarily can't draw, because I think a lot of the can't draw conversation goes to booking, and that's just always my answer. 90% of the business is booking. I think most wrestlers, if they're given something to work with, can get over. Genuinely, not everyone, but genuinely, I think the good ones that make it to WWE level, most of them don't get over because they're not given anything to get over. I just genuinely believe that. That it's fully booking. Like Vince McMahon would say Rusev couldn't get over. But he just never gave Rusev anything to get over. So when Rusev created his own catchphrase with Rusev Day and got over, like, to me, that just sort of proved my point. That a lot of these guys who make it to this level can get over if they're given something from the booking perspective. And so, for me, I would rather someone who has a long, dominating title reign, but ultimately, I would book them for that to matter. But to me, at least I can say, I don't know. I just like longer title reigns in general, so I'm going to go with that. Next, do you like plain soda, like just plain Coke, plain Pepsi? Or do you like a fruity flavor like a cherry Pepsi or a cherry Coke? Yes, is my answer. I have to be in a mood for cherry Pepsi, but I like it. But I have to be in a mood for it. Genuinely, I typically just go plain. So if I were to stop at a gas station, like say Circle K, you can get 89-cent soda, like large 42-ounce cup, right? And at least that's the price in North Carolina. And if I'm going in and I'm stopping for that, it's probably genuinely just normal Pepsi. That's just or it's cheer wine, but that's not a national drink, so most people don't know about that. But genuinely, it's like normal Pepsi. Every now and then I'll be in a mood to be like, oh, cherry. Now, most fountains don't have cherry Coke on it, or unless you're at like a really big gas station. But most of them now have cherry Coke. So I'll grab a cherry Coke. Like if I had to pick one, it would be Pepsi. I like cherry Pepsi. I do. But I would probably pick Pepsi, just plain Pepsi, to be honest. Next question, what's the best flavor for wings? So I'll be honest, I'm not a hot sauce guy on my chicken wings. I just am not. I don't like barbecue. Genuinely, there's typically 3 flavors that I would choose between. Either hot honey mustard. I like hot honey mustard. Like a mango habanero, or like a sweet and spicy, or something similar to that. All 3 of those flavors typically are, there's a kick or a heat, but it's also like sweet. I don't know what it is about that flavor combination that I like the best with chicken. I'm not here's the hottest hot sauce that I could find. I don't like heat, to be honest with you. And I don't like barbecue on my wings. Just, I don't like barbecue sauce in general, for the most part. But give me something like sweet and tangy. So mango habanero, hot honey mustard, sweet and spicy, something along that flavor profile, and I'll those are my favorite. Out of those three, if I had to pick the best, because you asked for the best, I think mango habanero would be my favorite. If you could have any animal as a pet, what would you choose? This one's easy without a doubt. A chimp. I want a chimp. If I could have a chimp and be promised that this thing on any given day wouldn't rip my face off, and it was legal in North Carolina without permits, because I'm not a permit person, right? If I have to go through the government to have possession of something, it's not free. It's not freedom, right? And I don't want to have to do that. So, but I have always wanted a chimp. I love chimps. I think they're great animals. But you know, there's the whole they have really strong grip and could eat your face off, and so there's that. But I would love to have a chimpanzee. I don't know. That's my favorite animal. I don't know. They're pretty cool. Last one that he asked, you have the chance to go back in time and sit under the learning tree of the greatest philosophers to ever exist. Who are you choosing? And this one's tough. Because I could say like Plato or Socrates or anything like that. But I think genuinely my brain would not process the way they would. Like I genuinely, I'm a worldview person, right? And so looking at their worldviews, like I would butt heads with them because they just have a lot of incorrect views of mankind. I thought about this, and many people may not consider this guy a philosopher. I mentioned him earlier in the show, and that is Paul the Apostle. We don't know his last name. Paul. First off, this dude is influential in early Christian thought. Many consider him the father of Christianity. That's kind of just a lie. He didn't start the religion, but he is probably the most important writer of Christianity, at least early Christianity. But philosophically, this dude is legit, bro. So first off, he studied under Gamaliel. I think it's how you pronounce his teacher's name. For those who don't know Jewish history, he's probably the greatest Jewish rabbi of all time. This dude, like Paul the Apostle, when he was under his Jewish name of Saul, before he converted to Christianity, like he was educated, bro. Like Paul in what book was it? Is it 2 Corinthians? He gives his resume of who he is. Like, this is the type of guy I am, bro. I don't remember where it's at, though. Let me find this. I should have pulled this up. There it is. 11. So, essentially, in 2 Corinthians, he's writing to these people who kind of are fractioned. They've heard some of the teachers in the area essentially say Paul isn't qualified to be teaching them. And so Paul just sort of had enough of this and just starts going off on them. It would also help if I chose the right Corinthians. So Paul sort of defending his apostleship in chapter 11 here, towards the end of this letter. And he starts to give this resume of who he is. And this is even the one I was talking about, because that's the one where he sort of lists his sufferings. That's what I'm looking at. It's Philippians, not. He lists several resumes. But the one I'm looking for is in Philippians. Duh. And he says this. Although I myself might have confidence. So he's teaching this, this idea of, he's writing to the Philippians, essentially telling them to be like Christ and not to boast in yourself. And he starts to lay out, he says, although I might have confidence even in my flesh, if anyone else has put to mind confidence in the flesh, I have far more. Basically saying, if you think you're good enough, I'm better than you. Listen to what he says. He says, I was circumcised on the 8th day, very important, I'm a true Jew, of the nation of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, very important tribe, a Hebrew of Hebrews. As to the law, I was a Pharisee, meaning he was highly prestigious. Hebrew of Hebrews mean he was in the Sanhedrin, right? He was of the 72 most influential people in Judaism. As to zeal, a persecutor of the church, right? I was so religiously zealous as a Jew, I would kill Christians, right? Like, this dude was on fire for just removing Christians. Like, he was down for it. Like, he stood on business. Right? A persecutor of the church. As to the righteousness which comes from the law, I was blameless. I kept the law. Right? Like, I did all of these things. I was in line. Like, this dude was in line, bro, to probably be, at some point in time, the high priest. His teacher, Gamaliel, was his teacher, right? And was one of the greatest Jewish teachers of that time. Paul, right? So why else would I choose Paul? Read the book of Romans. Like, the book of Romans is actually used in Harvard Law School to teach lawyers in training how to give an argument. Not from a theological perspective, but just read the book legally. He gives arguments, the way he argues for the legitimacy of the religion and the case that he's trying to make. Stellar. Fantastic. Could have beat any lawyer, I believe, in this country. Brilliant mind. But he does something a lot of philosophers don't know how to do. And that is change his message. Not change the message, but change how he gives the message. So many philosophers can only speak to their experience or their culture. But we see in the book of Acts, Paul goes to Athens and he stands in what we call the Areopagus or Mars Hill, which was a place where the philosophers would discuss and talk about things. And he gives a presentation to them, and he speaks their language, and he speaks their culture. And then he goes and he speaks to other people according to their culture. This dude was just a great mind. This dude is my hero, bro. If there's any person when I get to heaven that I ever want to meet, it's Paul, bro. I love his writings, bro. Like, genuinely, of all of history, this is one dude I would love to have a conversation with. So he would be the guy I would sit under. I'm not a big fan of most secular philosophers anyway. Again, they just have a different worldview than me. We wouldn't get along together. All right, so that's that. That's enough of you guys asking me questions. We're going to do it like we always do. With the slapping me question of the week, I'm going to give my opinion on it, but I want to hear from y'all in the Discord. Are wrestling influencers / content creators really needed? Do they create a net positive or a net negative? And my answer is this. Yes, both. I think that's actually a neutral. I don't think there's a net positive, but I also don't think it's a net negative. Because there's pros and cons to them. I genuinely think we should have content creators on wrestling. We talked about this earlier in a different episode, where I think the problem isn't that there's content creators. It's the gatekeeping, and it's the fact that everyone does the same content. No one's really creative. Are the spoilers bad? In a way? Now, I always have this understanding. Like, I think we all should understand. Like, I can't stop people from posting on Twitter. And if you're not watching the product live, you can't blame other people for talking about a live event. You just can't blame people for doing that. Now, if it's 3 weeks before the event and you leak something, now I have a problem. But if you're going to get upset because people post their content of them reacting and live streaming to a live event to get people maybe to join the live stream, I'm going to be honest with you, that's a stupid complaint. That's literally what they're supposed to do to promote their product. I'm not going to hate on someone for live tweeting or live reacting a show. I'm just not going to. I genuinely don't have a problem with them, to be honest with you. But I have another one, because this is a hypothetical I saw yesterday. Now remember, this is a hypothetical. This is intentionally supposed to be difficult, the way I pose the question. Because it's what we call the stuck between a rock and a hard place phenomenon, where neither of the two choices are perfect choices, but you have to choose one, right? So here's the situation. You get home, park in your driveway, you notice your house is on fire. You only have enough time to walk inside and save either your spouse or your children. You can only save one. So imagine in this situation, you're married, let's say 3 kids. You go in the house, you can either go upstairs and save your spouse, or go down to the basement and save the children. Who are you choosing, and why? This is typically a personality question. But it's also a question to see if people can be rational in their thought. Because both are rational choices, but can you rationalize why you make your choice? I will say this. I've asked other people this question this week, and it is without a doubt the most popular answers. I would go save my children. Not that I think that that's necessarily the wrong answer. I would say, now, I don't know what I would do in the moment, but if in this hypothetical I had to act, because So here's what my brother did. Junkyard James did was he started overanalyzing this hypothetical. You got to answer within the boundaries I set. You have to choose one, and you can't create other what-if situations. Because that's what Junkyard James did. He started asking, like, well, who started the fire? Was it the kids or the spouse? Because I'm saving the other one. Or, there'll be some people who rationalize it with, like, well, my wife is an adult. She knows how to walk out herself. Well, that's not part of the question. The way the question is worded makes it seem like no one is able to save themselves. Right? So you're needed to save one of them, but you can only save one of them. That's how the question is worded. You got to stay within that realm. Right? And so, like, my brother, Junkyard James, he was like, well, who started the fire? Or what if I just choose to save neither? Which, first off, that's the worst answer. So both parties, your children and your wife, die because you're not willing to act. Like, I can't save both of them, so I'm going to save none of them is a crazy, crazy way to respond to that question. My answer is hard for some people to hear. I would save my spouse. Genuinely. I would save my wife. If I was married and it's walk upstairs and save her from her death, or walk downstairs and save the children. It would be difficult, but I would instantly have the thought, I believe, of saving my wife. 100%. My rationale for that is two things. I've mentioned what is known as the Ordo Amoris, which is Ordo meaning order, is Latin for order, and Amoris being the Latin for love. The order of loves, or rightly ordered loves. It's the way we ought to view, so it's God, spouse, children, local family, so like mom, right? So it's God, spouse, children, parents, your parents, right? Other, siblings, other family members, community, neighborhood, state, country, other countries, right? Something you get the point I'm trying to make, right? And at the top of the list, obviously, is God. And then next is spouse. I thought of this from my worldview, which is more so the Christian worldview. Now, there's no biblical command either way. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here. But I do believe marriage is the only relationship you have in which you are commanded to love your spouse as Christ loved the church. And like, you're not commanded to love your children as Christ loved the church. You're commanded to love your wife that way, sacrificially. But also, the idea of marriage is you're one flesh. So how you treat yourself, you treat your spouse. You're not that same. You don't have that same relationship with your kid. Like, I know in our modern world where we worship our kids, and where marriages stick together for the kids, and the kids become the center of the universe, that's a hard statement to say. Not that I want them to suffer and die. I'm not saying that. But my spouse is the one I'm commanded to love more than my children. Right? Because eventually the children are to leave. The wife never supposed to leave. Right? I also just sort of half joking when I say this, I could have more kids. But I have to have a wife. Now you can answer back, well, you can find another wife. And sure, you could say that. Like I said, there's no right or wrong answer. I would probably, again, my actual answer is I don't know how I would react in that situation until it actually happened. But if I had to pick one, because you have to pick one, I would say wife. I want to hear what you guys have to say. But with that, That's been another episode of the Slapping Meat community show. A little bit extra long edition, being that there's no Friday show. Thank you all for listening. And until next week. Next Tuesday, you're going to hear my review of Monday Night Raw from being in the building with K-Dog. Cody he may or may not be on the podcast. I'm not promoting that, but I'm going to Raw with him. So we'll have that experience. I may get his opinion on some of it. Even if he's not on the show, I may share his opinion on the show. But with that, y'all have a great rest of your week. I will see you all next Tuesday right here on the Slapping Meat community show.
So hit that subscribe, come along for the ride, whether it's NXT or NFL time. Going in the ropes and fourth and deep, Slapping Meat community every Tuesday. Every Tuesday.